experience of black people there, which was described as uniquely horrific by the lawyer Lord Gifford in his recent independent report on race relations in the city. Next week, the Gifford report is to be considered for the first time by the city councillors who commissioned it. No organisation was more heavily criticised than the council itself for discrimination in housing, schools and social services. However, as Gifford makes clear, Liverpool's black people face an unequal struggle in most aspects of the city's life. Peter Marshall has been to Liverpool to speak to members of Britain's oldest black community. His report begins in an area where Liverpudlians have excelled for generations, on the football pitch.
Come on, get that midfield sorted out. The gov's standing here.
The standards may be uneven, but of all the Sunday League teams across the land, Almithak, in red, are the best, current holders of the National Cup. They're drawn from the Toxteth area of Liverpool, the district known locally by its postcode, Liverpool 8. In common with many other teams here, like the population of Liverpool 8 itself, half of them are black.
Come on, stop messing about, say! Come on, Lambert! Go on, Lambert! Come on!
People here are passionate about the game and tell you of all the fine players, local black players, there have been. Strangely, none has ever made it to the very top of the professional game, to a regular place with the local clubs, Liverpool or Everton. In fact, the only black player to star on Merseyside was born in Jamaica and bought from Watford for nearly £1 million. John Barnes' signing gave Liverpool one of the most gifted players in the world, but it also drew attention to the ugly side of the psyche of this city, to the racism Lord Gifford calls uniquely horrific. Among the Liverpool crowd, Barnes was an instant hero, and their racist chanting was suddenly, markedly quietened. But at rivals Everton, the opposite was the case. Barnes' appearance there was met with spitting, showers of bananas and monkey noises.
A few boos being directed there at John Barnes. We could do without that.
Sunday afternoon in Liverpool 8, and Almithak, victorious, enjoy a post-match drink. It's both instructive and shaming. In Liverpool, so very few black people go to football matches.
We have a nice time on occasions. Those occasions tend to be when there's no black players on the pitch. Evan haven't got me. Of late, last season, my son started picking his games. He'd actually try and find a team where there was no black players in.
Why?
Well, because he knew that racism would be thrown at them, so he's just block it out and he wouldn't go, and he'd stop going with me.
Such are the lengths to which black people have to go to avoid racism at football. But in everyday life in Liverpool, the effects of racism can't be escaped.
Maybe it's the general consensus that they don't want to see black people get on. I mean, maybe we're considered a threat, I don't know.
They like to keep the, as you could say, the black people all together, so to speak. They don't really want you to drift out. That's the impression I always get. It's like, oh yeah, you can have a flat in such a place or a house there, as if they want to keep us confined to one area, as if like we can't go and live where we choose.
You know, we're going to look around the stores or go into any shop. They look at you firstly as if you're going to steal something, and you'll be followed from one end of the shop to the other, or you'll be continually harassed to, you know, what can I do for you, until you feel uncomfortable and you'll walk out.
Between 8 and 10% of the population of Liverpool is black, yet you won't see many black faces in the city centre, and it's extremely rare to see a black person working in the shops. Some firms say they're planning schemes for black trainees, but these tend to be small scale. The only big company with a major scheme is Littlewoods. As well as the retail chain, they operate a mail order business and the football pools. But at the top, they remain a family firm, and the family, the Moores, are still based in Liverpool.
I grew up in the north of Liverpool, and I didn't really know there were black people until about 20 years ago, I think. I was very conscious of Catholics. We all knew about Catholics and Protestants. That was the big fight in Liverpool. But there weren't any black people in the shops. There weren't any black people shopping. You didn't see them in the buses or anything. And so I didn't know there were black people, really.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Quite. Now that I'm older and know about it, I can't believe it.
John Moore's enlightenment came through a posting to America, and it's resulted in the Equal Opportunities Unit. The idea is to encourage black people to apply for jobs so that the number of black employees will reflect the true racial mix of the city. The target date for achieving this is 1992. John Moore says it's most important to make it clear that equal opportunities are essential.
It's got to be a company policy. It's got to be written into the company policy. And the next most important thing, I think, is that you've got to have your bonus scheme for managers based on profit and sales and a few other things and their performance and equal opportunities.
It's as important as that?
Yeah.
Setting up a small business is always fraught, particularly in a city pulled low by recession. But the problems are still greater, it seems, when the would-be businessmen are black. The partners running this garage have been in business in Liverpool 8 for nearly 10 years.
When we first approached the banks, we got the impression that they thought that if they loaned us money, we were going to just spend it on a fancy car, you know, the same old cliche like that, that's all we're interested in. Because I still think there's the feeling of mistrust because of the colour of the skin.
We just carried on battling against the system. And we got through, and we're still fighting through now. But eventually we'll get there.
The City Council has just put £5.5 million towards assisting another wider battle to create young black professionals. Interviews have been going on for places on a year's training scheme. It's one means of replenishing the dwindling pool of black talent, all lost to the brain drain that's hit the whole city, but once again has most affected the black population. There's a rueful saying in Liverpool 8 that the buildings are cemented with the blood of African slaves. Liverpool was at the very hub of the slave trade, and this, together with its former preeminence as a seaport, has left it with the longest established black community in the country. Yet even at the new Maritime Museum, Liverpool's role in the slave trade is, according to Gifford, glossed over. Black Liverpudlians all but ignored. It was only the riots of 1981 that brought attention to Liverpool's black population. 8 years later, on the front line, Granby Street, the police remain the enemy. The most common complaint spelt out by Gifford is that they fail to stop dealers in hard drugs, yet still harass the innocent.
It's like living in a police state. It's a police state, that's all, you know what I mean? I can't go nowhere. I go out to enjoy myself, and there's police there in the clubs, in the pubs in town, looking at me, wondering where I'm getting my money from to spend, you know what I mean? Counting how much I'm spending on, you know what I mean? It's no good, like.
The police, though, say things are looking up. While critics complain of insensitive patrolling by officers in vans, they emphasise the role of the bobby on the beat. As for Gifford, they refuse to cooperate with the report and aren't happy with its findings.
Basically, I thought it was untrue. I thought it was unkind. I don't think it added at all to the developing relationship between Merseyside Police and the community in Liverpool 8. In fact, I think it could be divisive, and in that sense, I'm saddened by that.
The City Council, who commissioned Gifford and were more heavily criticised than any other body for institutionalised racism, feel the police got it wrong.
I think the police made a gigantic error in refusing to admit the scale of the problem. I think there's misbehaviour by police officers. I think not every police officer by a million miles, but I think some of it. And the inability of the police ever to admit they've made a mistake, ever, is appalling.
Complaints about policing are widespread in Liverpool 8. Even so-called community leaders have disturbing stories to tell.
We went out for a social evening and couldn't get into a club and made a complaint to them, and we were subsequently attacked by a police officer, several of us, many of us women, beaten up, imprisoned, put through the courts for 8 days, found not guilty, took the club itself under the Race Relations Act. They were found guilty of racial discrimination, and after that we put in a police complaint and a claim for compensation. The police gave us £1,500 each, and the police complaint against the officer, we were wanting him to be dismissed because obviously he's a danger to the public in what he did. as far as we're concerned, that police officer is still there.
Nothing happened to him?
Nothing happened to him.
It is the case that now and again officers' behaviour will fall short of what's expected. But we come down hard on that. The management and the supervision of the force is told and ordered and directed to deal very firmly with that.
What's firm dealing?
Well, in fact, disciplinary measures. If you're talking about people being abusive to members of the public, of whatever persuasion they are, of whatever colour or creed, then we're talking about the use of the discipline procedures. I mean, we're talking about...
How many officers have been disciplined for displaying racial prejudice on Merseyside?
None, not for displaying racial prejudice, but officers have been disciplined for abuse of authority, which is an analogous disciplinary offence.
In fact, in the last 2 years, 10 officers appeared before the Chief Constable for this offence. In 3 cases, the complainant was termed coloured. Merseyside Police say it's not their policy to reveal whether any of the complaints were upheld. The activities of the Liverpool 8 Law Centre are viewed by the force with suspicion, but the feeling is mutual. The centre has helped fight successful defence cases on the grounds of police racism. They've done it by recruiting black barristers from London. In Liverpool, there's none. The opinion here of the judicial process is very low.
The courts operate in Liverpool in a racist manner. Never in all the time that I've been monitoring courts have I ever seen a black juror or a black judge. And I understand that we are to be judged by our peers according to English law.
You've never seen a black juror?
I've never seen a black juror, no.
In how many cases is that?
Oh God, I've probably been in the course about 1,000 times in 10 years.
The Gifford inquiry was assured by the court's administrator that the proper random procedures for summoning jurors were being operated in Liverpool. The Gifford inquiry team carried out their own spot check on 24 courts here and found that with the exception of one black usher, the personnel, judges, lawyers, clerks, officers and jurors all were white. The Gifford report concludes that the effect of such all-white courts on a black defendant can be devastating, giving little confidence in the fairness of proceedings. Slideshows by and for school children, one small contribution towards educating Liverpool about the nature of racism. Gifford is just the latest in a series of reports demanding action on racism in Liverpool schools.
It's not just in the content of education, but it's in the attitude and the behaviour of a lot of teachers, and teachers who make comments to children like, have you just got off a banana boat, get back in your jam jar, you all look alike to me, and so on. And the work that I've been doing and that we're doing here is to challenge these attitudes, to educate people, to encourage more and more white people to challenge racism when they come across it, and not to ignore it.
The Sunday League is somewhat short on glamour. After a match, the basics have to be dismantled. It seems a world away from the big time at Liverpool and Everton. But the feeling here is that the gulf should have been bridged, that a black man from Liverpool 8 should have made it. They all talk of Howard Gale.
Here's Gale, who's come from a loan period with...
Howard Gale helped Liverpool to a European Cup final, yet he made only a handful of appearances before being sold as not quite good enough. He's now doing well, but in the second division. While the merits of any player can be debated, we aren't suggesting Howard Gale was badly treated by the club on the grounds of race. In the dressing room, though, he says what some players regarded as humour could be highly abusive.
Some of the banter that went around to say that the dressing room was all I can describe was pig ignorant at times. There'd be jokes about black this and maybe nigger that, and when I rebelled against the sort of attitude that was going on inside the dressing room, I seemed to be, well, it comes down to like a famous old cliche, I've got a chip on my shoulder. Basically all it was to say I didn't take that sort of nonsense on the street, and I wasn't going to take it in there.
The superstar John Barnes couldn't make it this time, so Howard Gale, a professional but still one of the lads, presents the trophies at Almithac's big night. The Sunday League champions swept the board last season, so there's plenty to celebrate, black and white together. In Liverpool, the black population has for too long seemed invisible to the white. The challenge now is for the whole city to start sharing one common vision of how to put things right.
That report by Peter Marshall. When we contacted both Liverpool and Everton football clubs, they told us that they abhor racism and that the only criterion they use is whether a player is good enough.